Welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 72, being recorded on December 21st, 2022. I don't know if it's the exact day of the start of winter, but it's around this time. It's usually like the 21st or the 23rd, so happy winter, I guess, unless you're in the southern hemisphere. The weird hemisphere. No, just the one that I'm not in. But yeah, anyway, it's winter up in the north, and it's cold. It's definitely colder than it was a few months ago, and we have some 40 people in the chat right now, and we're getting right into it with the comments today. So I think we're just going to jump right into that. We're definitely going to do 2 streams this week. Last week we only did 1 because on Thursday, instead of streaming last week, I did appear on the Thin Blue Lies podcast. So kind of my streaming time went towards that instead. But yeah, this week we've definitely got 2 streams worth of stories. So we're going to chat with the chat, and we're going to just cover a wide variety of things. As far as COVID stuff, we will dabble slightly in this stream. However, so last year I closed out with a New Year's Eve video. We actually weren't doing live streams at that time last year. We started that in like February or March this year. Anyway, we ended last year with kind of a COVID wrap-up video, and I have a lot of open tabs on COVID stuff, and I thought that there's so much of it, it probably just deserves its own video, and so we'll do something like that instead, like a year-end COVID wrap-up, and we'll get more of the COVID update stuff there. Actually, since we're mentioning COVID now, before I even do get into the comments, let's just check where we're at with the pandemic. So first of all, want to look at the Wastewater, biobot.io/data, biobot.io/data. And does the pandemic look over to you? No, it doesn't look over to me. So this was last updated on Monday using samples collected during last week. So this is from around the United States. It's not in every county, but many counties across the U.S. are monitoring their wastewater for SARS coronavirus 2 particles, and for various other things. Wastewater is monitored. And so now that cases aren't really being counted so much anymore, the PCR tests in 2020 and 2021, of course, were logged with the official reporting systems, but the over-the-counter rapid tests are not. You can go to a website like Make My Test Count. I forget if it's .org or .com, but it's Make My Test Count, and you can report the results of your rapid test there. However, what percentage of people do you think are actually going to do that? So very, very few. And then the PCR tests were no longer testing in schools, colleges, workplaces. I mean, a few are, but not as a matter of course across the whole country as standard. And so the tests, that's the sort of blue-green line underneath the darker blue line, and that's fallen way off. You would think that the pandemic is over because there aren't cases, but really there aren't cases because there's not the same testing. So we look at the wastewater, and the wastewater is a good rapid indicator of how much COVID is out there, how much of the SARS coronavirus 2 virus is circulating and replicating in people's bodies and then being excreted into the wastewater. We can see that we're in the middle of a surge right now. It's plateauing slightly, but we have, Christmas coming up and New Year's, and historically that has led to big spikes. For example, last year Omicron, I think New Year's Day was the spike. So anyway, like the very peak of the spike. So that's what's going on with COVID right now, and a bunch of people saying literally no one around them, not even old people, are masking anymore. Also, I think only about 14 or 15% of eligible people got the most recent booster shot. And some of this is because people, specifically didn't want to. Some of it also is just because people think, well, I already got 2 or 3 or 4 shots. Aren't I all set? And that's a reasonable thing to think. The vaccines do require this sort of constant boosting, and we're going to need something more permanent than that long term, because people, I mean, as a general rule, don't tend to enjoy injections so much, and it's inconvenient. It's a hassle. Also, I think people just think, oh, I got vaccinated, I'm done. And so there's confusion about, well, why would I need to go get, another booster shot now? But anyway, things aren't good. And we've talked about long COVID a lot. And this is basically lasting consequences of a COVID infection that start really after that first, 2 to 4 week acute period of illness. After that, you're, I mean, at least 1 out of 6 people, even among the fully vaccinated, and then a higher percentage of people who are not fully vaccinated, experience symptoms starting 2 or 3 months after infection and then lasting for about a year roughly, at least for the symptoms that do resolve. There are other symptoms that, like cognitive impairment, may or may not actually resolve, that may be going on 2 or even 3 years after the initial infection. In general, a lot of the things do tend to resolve within a year, but that's a long time. And one of the things is immune function. So there is, this is a study from about a year ago, 11 months ago. Immunological dysfunction persists for 8 months following initial mild to moderate SARS coronavirus 2 infection. So you can have a mild infection and your immune system is suppressed for 8 months afterwards because of a few things. The virus attacks your T cells directly and kills them. Also, basically, it's like after a COVID infection, after a bout of COVID, your immune system, it's like running a marathon and it can't stop. And so you're more susceptible to other things in that, 8, 12, 10 months afterwards. So we're seeing things like a massive surge right now. This is in Canada. So here's your normal pediatric hospitalizations for seasonal flu. So you have an average there, that's the gray line, 2014 to 15, or the winter 2014-15, and then a 5-year average up to 2019 to 20. So that's that gray area, and then there's a dark line in the middle representing sort of the middle of that average. Then to compare 2021 and 22, when there was more masking, way, way down. But now, masking's gone, and it hasn't just rebounded to the normal level. It's way, way exceeded it. Why? Well, it's because most likely immune disruption, immune suppression, basically. It's not just suppression, but anyway, COVID hurts your immune system. That's the point. And so things like flu are hitting people harder. Things like RSV are hitting harder. And there's a variety of things like that going on. Actually, here's a quick story about something called the tomato flu. So, warning, there might be a couple of pictures of like pustules in here. But here's a story, tomato flu outbreak in India. Here's what it really is. This is from a couple of months ago. It's from late August. So, of course, I got that little pop-up when I did the screenshot. But so this is by Sarah Pitt. A, quote, new virus called tomato flu is circulating, apparently first reported on May 6th. And there's an outbreak in India. Let's go on to the next screen there. So most of those infected are children under the age of 5 with symptoms including a high temperature, intense joint pain, and a rash. The children also suffered an eruption of red, painful blisters that grew to the size of a tomato, hence the name. Although the children can be unwell, there have been no reports of serious illness or death so far. Everyone seems to be recovering. Doctors treating the children were unsure what was causing this illness. The temperature, aches, and pains could be due to any number of infections because That's just how your immune system responds to many infections originally. When it enters your system and you try to start fighting it. That's the result in many cases. They speculated that it might be the result of some exotic-sounding viruses that are transmitted by mosquitoes, such as dengue and chikungunya, or even chickenpox. They thought that perhaps the unusual tomato-shaped rash might be occurring because children were reacting differently to infections after they had COVID. Also, because of the large size of the spots, there was even a suggestion that it might be monkeypox. Mystery solved. Scientists have been testing samples from children with tomato flu to try to identify the cause of the disease. 2 children in the UK who developed suspected tomato flu symptoms after returning from a family holiday in Kerala were swabbed. The lab results revealed that they were infected with an enterovirus named Coxsackie A16. Coxsackie A16 causes hand, foot, and mouth disease, so called because the patient has blisters on the palms of their hands, soles of their feet, and in their mouth. So it seems that tomato flu is actually HMFD. It's not a type of influenza, has nothing to do with tomatoes, and is not a new disease. It's not in any way related to foot and mouth disease of cattle. It's usually mild and clears up by itself within a week or two, although pain relief can be helpful. Sometimes people get sores in their mouth, which makes it hard to swallow, so dehydration can be a problem in small children. In very rare cases, the person can develop viral meningitis. So meningitis is an inflammation of the meninges, which is like a protective covering surrounding your central nervous system. But it is important to note that so far no cases of serious illness following tomato flu have been reported from India. Like many common childhood infections, it is very contagious, although this one is not common. But similar to the common ones, it is very contagious, can be spread through feces and fluid in the spots. So parents are advised that children with HFMD should be kept away from school or nursery for 5 days after the symptoms start. So they continue, there's the picture of the virus. Viruses have been doing strange things since the COVID pandemic started. For example, I think it's probably more accurate to say it's immune systems have been doing strange things since the COVID pandemic started. For example, seasonal winter viruses spread in summer 2020, and no one is entirely sure what caused the outbreak of hepatitis in children in 2021. Raising a hand here, yeah, that was probably COVID. SARS-1 was known to cause liver injury, and we've covered this pediatric hepatitis that most likely was related to COVID in 2021. It's a bit of sort of gaslighting here to say that no one's entirely sure. There's pretty good evidence that it was COVID, actually. And this is also when that's started, and we were covering this much earlier, the immunity debt hypothesis was still going on at that time. Immunity debt is basically the bogus theory that because of the shutdowns, kids weren't getting exposed to bacteria and viruses, pathogens as normal, and so their immune systems softened, basically. And then when they got back out there, they got hit harder. Well, we had half-assed, very partial shutdowns in the first place, and which is it? Masks don't work, or masks are so effective that your immune system, it goes unchallenged for such a long time that it goes soft. Which is it? Because the same people believe in the same contradictory statements there. Anyway, this is COVID-induced immune dysfunction. That's a far more likely hypothesis that actually fits all the facts. And until 2022, monkeypox outbreaks outside of Africa only involved small numbers of people. So, basically prior to last year, or this year, excuse me, the biggest monkeypox outbreak was in the low triple digits in the United States. And it was controlled rapidly, and it just wasn't a big deal. This year, we had almost 30,000 confirmed cases, and probably many more unconfirmed. That is, over 100-fold increase out of the blue. So what's going on? Again, is there something going on with people's immune systems? Well, there is a very contagious virus circulating, SARS coronavirus 2, which does hurt the immune system. So, yeah. Anyway, continuing. Now we have these unusually large tomato-type rashes that aren't typical for HFMD. It will be interesting to find out why the spots look different enough for the disease to be given a new name. The tomato flu rash might be due to a range of different causes, and this highlights the value of accurate laboratory testing for viruses. However, it's worth noting that fewer than 100 cases of tomato flu have been reported since early May. Sounds delicious, I have to say, but so the outbreak is probably under control. And yeah, for now, but again, what are we going to have in 2023? Like, nobody saw the monkeypox thing coming, and then tomato flu just emerges out of the blue. Okay, it's only 100 cases, but, you know, then the next weird thing pops up, and oh, it's 200,000 cases. You know, right now we're dealing with a surge of seasonal flu, which is unlike, you know, most outbreaks of seasonal flu, and RSV and other things. You know, we covered the Strep A situation in the UK, for example. This is like unheard of in any other year. And yet, mainstream sources are refusing to acknowledge that the let it rip COVID policy, which is entirely focused on basically saying, see, you can survive acute COVID, problem solved. In other words, you can get COVID, have, you know, asymptomatic to moderate symptoms in the first month, and then, you know, we can wash our hands of the whole thing, problem solved. Well, no, because that's not the way COVID works. You know, people who get HIV, the initial symptoms are also flu-like, but then you develop, you know, significant other problems down the line. Same thing with COVID. It may not be as long-term and terminal as something like AIDS, but I mean, if you keep it, let's say it lasts for 8 to 12 months and you get infected every 6 months, well, then your immune system is going to be hurt and, you know, de facto suppressed pretty much indefinitely. So again, how do we end the pandemic? We stop the pandemic by ending the spread, and, you know, vaccines alone can somewhat reduce spread by lowering viral load, but it's really masks, social distancing, things like that. Vaccines are good as a last line of defense in case you do get infected. It can prime your immune system to respond if the virus does get into your body, and it can, you know, just basically help you to fight it off more quickly and more thoroughly and more effectively. But it's not perfect protection against long COVID. Reduces your odds to 1 in 6, which are still substantial odds. And so bottom line is, in N95 we trust. And, you know, the vaccine is sort of last resort backstop there. That's not the approach that's being taken by and large by, you know, the U.S. government. Many similar governments is like, oh, you got vaccinated, you're good to go. Well, no, you're not. That's just straight up misinformation. Get the vaccine, it helps, but you need to prevent the body, or prevent the virus from entering your body in the first place. That is really the main thing, and they're just not helping at a structural societal level for that. All right, anyway, I think that that's most of the like health pandemic related stuff we're going to do. Let me just take a quick scan over things. Oh, I did want to mention also that the U.S. Government has resumed its free testing program. So if you go to, let me get the website here. I put this up on the community tab as well. covidtests.gov. covidtests.gov. You can order some of those free tests. They've been unavailable for several months, but you can get some again. Now, it's also important to mention about the free tests. Like I said, you can go to Make My Test Count. I think it's .org. Anyway, I'm sure if you look it up, you can report the results of your rapid tests. Honestly, I kind of feel like it's a drop in the bucket at this point because most people aren't going to be doing that. And so, you know, it sort of gives you a misleading sense looking at the case numbers. There was something else I wanted to show, which was the rapid test. So the rapid tests may not be working as people think that they are. And let me bring this up because I got to actually grab this shot, but it's going to be worth the wait. Rapid tests may not actually work the way that people think that they're working. Specifically, all right, so there was a commenter who helped out with pointing this out, and I just have to grab the screenshot. Basically, you need to test much. A lot of people will get symptoms and then run a rapid test on themselves. So they'll swab their nose. And first of all, when you're doing that, to get the most accurate results, there have been studies done on this, you want to swab the back of your throat, and you want to swab the inside of your cheeks, and then you want to swab deep inside the nose. So not the outer nostril, but more up into the pharynx, like beyond your nose. It should be uncomfortable. All right, so I found the thing. Getting that as your swab is going to give you more accurate results. It's going to collect a better sample, basically, for testing. But then after you get the symptoms, your rapid test may not actually show accurate results. So here we go. This is, if you go back a couple of posts in the community tab, where I posted the story about you can get the free tests again, somebody posted this. Just look for the RAT comment, and there's a link to Twitter if you want the source on this. So basically, infectiousness, you see down the left side, number of days into the infection. So the third column is symptom onset. So basically, the symptoms are most likely to be present on days 2, 3, and 4 in the most intense ways. However, look over at the 4th and 5th columns at the test sensitivity. Very low still. Where are the tests most sensitive? Days 4 or 5 to 10 or 11. So you actually have to kind of wait with the rapid tests for the most accurate results, or you would at least want to retest later. And I wonder if this has even happened to me, where you test with the rapid test on like day 3 of your symptoms and it's negative. But I wonder if you retested another 2 or 3 days later, would it be actually more accurate? So yeah. You know what? Since I'm constantly making misleading statements, not about the information in the video, but the information about the video. I said we're just going to go straight into the chat. Here we are doing like a drill down on COVID stuff. I guess I just had more in the bag than I thought I did. But anyway, we will get back to the comments, as this is actually the last thing. So here's a story. We're starting to talk about this actually because there was a comment that I was reading, which was somebody said there should be like a Tinder, but for matching with friends based on your COVID safety preferences. And I said, it's funny because I actually have a story on that, and it's not Tinder, but there are Facebook groups. So this is a story from the Washington Post, and it's from 2 months ago. For those still trying to duck COVID, yeah, that would be a smart thing to do, actually. The isolation is worse than ever. It's by Ellen McCarthy from the Washington Post. So there's a picture there. Christine Grimaldi and Jeremy Polovsky are among those who continue to take precautions to prevent COVID infections, including, and just not the most flattering photo there, I have to say, but including masking, social distancing, and homeschooling their kids. So yeah, for people taking COVID seriously, there's actually a huge imposition on us because, if you're the only one wearing a mask out of 100 people, your mask has to contend with much more airborne virus than it would if everyone was wearing a mask. So for people who are still doing the same thing of trying to not get the virus in their body and then cross their fingers that everything's going to work out for the best, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a burden being put on us. So anyway, here we go. Of course, Jeremy Polovsky and Christine Grimaldi want people to meet their new baby. This is their only child, after all, the long-awaited first grandkid on either side. But first, some ground rules. The visit will take place in the backyard, Anyone who wants to come over will need to take a rapid coronavirus test. And if guests want to hold the baby or go inside to use the bathroom, they'll be asked to wear a mask. These measures seem like common sense to Pawlowski and Grimaldi. Yes, and time out, they seem like common sense to me too, because there's a fucking pandemic happening. And what this really makes me reflect on is just how not seriously the shutdowns were taken in 2020. Nobody really internalized it, or like really about 1% of the population actually internalized it. We now have, every state public health department, CDC state level equivalent, and the federal CDC, and both the major political parties not taking this thing seriously. And it kind of makes you wonder if anyone ever really did take it seriously. I think we all saw neighbors hosting, cookouts in their yard when there was supposed to be a shutdown back in 2020. I knew somebody was like, just disobey the thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really sure that's like the best idea though. So here's people who have a baby and yeah, they don't want their baby to get COVID. That's actually not crazy. Continuing. They're trying to keep themselves and their infants safe. Plus they want to protect their elderly parents and do their part to reduce community spread. Not long ago, the couple felt like their precautions were in sync with much of the rest of society. But in recent months, their idea of COVID common sense has grown painfully out of tune with the view, and there's a missing word here, the incorrect view, that it's time to throw caution to the wind and masks in the garbage. Quote, I didn't feel draconian before, and I feel draconian now, says Grimaldi, 36. Everyone seems to have abandoned the things that were de rigueur before. Pawlowski and Grimaldi are among the Americans who are still going very far out of their way to avoid the virus. And let me just ask you, why do you have to go very far out of your way? Because it's fucking everywhere. Why is it everywhere? Because people are putting it everywhere. Because people are spreading it everywhere. They don't dine indoors at restaurants. They continue to practice social distancing. They wear highly protective masks if they must visit a doctor or stop at a pharmacy. They won't even mention the name of the mask, like a KN95, an N95, a P100, an N99, etc., a KF94. But yeah. Some are homeschooling their kids, others are refusing to return to the office. They comprise the dozens of social media groups whose members identify as still COVIDing. Many of them would like the unmasked masses to know this isn't easy and that it's only gotten harder. Quote, we've turned down various parties and events that are indoors because we just don't feel comfortable doing that yet, says Pawlowski, 47. We're a bit cut off from certain friends, unfortunately. And while none of their guests have balked at their requests, the couple knows it will all get harder in the winter, when it's less comfortable to socialize outdoors, to say the least. They took the threat seriously from the beginning and have managed to avoid contracting the virus as far as they know. For a short time, post-vaccination, they loosened their restrictions. But they doubled down after finding out that Grimaldi was pregnant last fall, especially as the pregnancy took a toll on her health. The couple kept up precautions after the baby arrived, not wanting to expose an unvaccinated infant. But even when the baby gets her second dose of the vaccine next month, Pawlowski and Grimaldi expect to continue masking and taking other measures to mitigate the risk. Grimaldi got a taste of prolonged illness during pregnancy and doesn't want to return to that state. Pawlowski fears the effects of long COVID. The precautions don't feel particularly onerous to the couple. What gnaws at them is the sense that they're out of step with society. I feel like an outlier for doing the things that were standard just a short while ago, Grimaldi said. And again, let's remember, nothing has fundamentally changed. We looked at that biobot curve of wastewater. It's literally worse now than it was before. And the variants are more immune evasive and more contagious. So all of this makes more sense now, not less. But that's the exact opposite direction that most of society is being led in by the capitalists who own and direct society. There's no reliable tally of the people who are still COVIDing, but certainly they're in the minority. A September poll by Monmouth University found that 22% of people are very concerned about a family member becoming seriously ill with COVID, compared with 45% the previous September. And a quarter of Americans supported mask mandates and social distancing guidelines, down from 63% last September. I would like to just stick a foot in the door there. Let's remember that there are stark differences across demographics. It is old white conservatives who are the most likely to oppose mask mandates and other measures, and then it goes down from there, particularly among Hispanic and Black Americans, much more likely to support mask mandates and things like that, and also conservatives more likely to oppose them than not. So anyway, people who continue to take many precautions know that when President Biden said the pandemic is over during an interview last month, he was reflecting a popular attitude. No, but see, he's not just reflecting it, he's helping to create that attitude. When they said mask or vax, and Biden's office said mask or vax, like if you have the vaccine, mask is optional, they created that opinion. They're not just reflecting it, they're making it. It's policy they create because they have power. So anyway, hugely misleading reporting here, where they're just kind of playing dumb. This reporter is just playing dumb about the power relationships. The available vaccines and medicines have made things safe enough, people think, for enough people that we can finally close the book on 2020 and start partying, or at least living like it's 2019 again. Yeah, and has Biden and the CDC and the state level CDC or anyone else in the US government done anything to change this erroneous perception? No, they're fostering it. They're using their power to foster it on behalf of the people they work for, the richest people in the country who own the political parties. This makes it that much more isolating for the people who are still in pandemic mode. Quote, people are making judgments without having a kind of community consensus, which makes it harder for people, says Stephen Epstein, a sociology professor at Northwestern University. Epstein often contrasts the COVID pandemic and the AIDS pandemic when clear, widely agreed upon guidelines about how to stay safe emerged, such as wear condoms, don't share needles. The problem with COVID is that we don't have that kind of clarity. People are muddling through. We make very personal assessments at a time when there's no clear consensus. So this is also bullshit. And why are you talking to a sociology professor about a medical phenomenon? This is also somewhat misleading as far as in the early, AIDS went on for a while before that consensus emerged of like, how is HIV spread and how do you stop its spread and things like that. It was spread for quite a while when there were still just kind of, there was not widespread knowledge about that. I mean, originally it was called GRID, gay-related immune disease or disorder. And, that went on for years. So I don't think that that's a good comparison at all, especially there wasn't like a national shutdown over HIV, let alone a global shutdown over it. So these are different circumstances. People who are still taking all available precautions largely fall into two groups. Those with underlying health conditions for whom contracting the COVID-19 virus, or in some cases even getting the vaccine, could be very dangerous. Time out. So over 80% of people in the United States have a, quote, underlying health condition, which ups your risk of COVID-19. Now, some people beyond that have, some very specific heart or immune condition or something like that, where they're at extremely high risk. But generally speaking, people are vastly underestimating the average risk level from COVID because they're trained to think, again, by that opinion that is created by the U.S. government and health authorities, who are just actively misleading the public into thinking that the acute phase is really the danger, like the sole danger. They don't talk about long COVID nearly in proportion to the risk that long COVID causes. It'd be like if we were talking about HIV and just talking about the flu-like reaction that you get in the beginning with sort of ignoring the whole AIDS question down the line. Now, let's be clear, long COVID and AIDS are not the same thing, but there are significant similarities, especially since every reinfection seems to up your odds of whether it's clotting, whether it's heart attack, like whatever it is, Every subsequent infection increases your odds of those really severe adverse outcomes. So again, it's just not being discussed nearly in proportion to the actual threat. And again, people are being misled to think about it solely in terms of the acute first few weeks, and that's just not what people need to be thinking about. Anyway, and the other people are those who just don't want to get the virus, either because they fear acute illness or long-term deleterious effects. Again, casting this just as fearing them rather than being aware of them. And I think most of the people not taking COVID seriously aren't even aware of the real risk of long COVID. That no one wants that. No one wants increased risk of dementia or any number of other things. No one wants those things. It's just casting this as fear is again just kind of slandering the people you're talking about. Both camps, though, both people who just don't want it and who really feel that they could imminently die from it, have largely given up waiting for a light at the end of the tunnel. They view COVID as here to stay and have reordered their lives accordingly. Again, time out. COVID does not need to be here to stay. Why does it keep spreading? Because governments are allowing the kinds of behaviors that enable it to keep spreading. Recently we've seen China dabbling with pulling back restrictions and then having big outbreaks. It's not a good thing, and it's very black and white. So this is a result of policy choices, not COVID is here to stay. That's bullshit. That's not even what these people believe. So it's a misattribution. Lindsay Poveromo-Joly spent years as a hyper-engaged mom, the type who knew everyone at her kid's school and ran half the committees of the Parent-Teacher Association. She's also a rule follower, so from the beginning of the pandemic, the 36-year-old mother, this is what bizarre framing. She just loves rules. What is this? She has continued following all the rules, even when the rules were lifted in her home state of Florida. That's such a weird way of casting that. She just loves rules. So even when they lifted the rules, she kept following them. Well, I guess they wouldn't be the rules anymore. So if this was really about love for rules, she probably would have stopped. People kind of talk about you like you're a bunker person, Poveromo-Joly says. She has had friends subtly questioning her decisions, not to mention strangers. At one point when she was out with her masked children, she says, a passerby pretended to cough aggressively in their direction. So this is something called reverse contagion panic. Contagion panic is when people freak out about a contagion. Reverse contagion panic is when there's a contagion and people are freaking out because people are reacting to it. And is someone else's mask hurting you? Not even slightly. But it threatens you in some way because you're insecure with the decision not to be masking, and you just are carrying around a huge amount of doubt about your choices, and probably you're aware that you're acting on ignorance. Anyway. But Poveromo-Joly sees her continuing efforts to keep the virus out of her home as totally rational, which they are. She's worried about her youngest child, a daughter who is now 6 and has twice been hospitalized with severe cases of the flu, and about her husband who's a diabetic. That worry didn't disappear with access to vaccines. Time out. Why? Because especially after Omicron, the efficacy dropped considerably. Like the vaccines had 80% efficacy, I believe, against hospitalization for Delta. Now that's very good. That's a dramatic reduction. But then with Omicron, it dropped down to 38%. So it's literally cut in half. And then as far as long COVID, as far as we know, the vaccines can only get you to 1 in 6 risk of long COVID and no lower. So yeah, that is rational to be concerned about that, even with vaccines. So now her kids are homeschooled. They bought a new house with a home office for her husband so he could continue to work remotely. She has repopulated her social circle with new friends who are making similar choices. Most of their social circle is made up of other homeschooling families who they see regularly for outdoor gatherings and play dates. Rather than send her daughter to a nearby gym for tumbling class, Poveromo Jolie found a gymnastics instructor who will teach the little girl outside. When other fourth graders boarded a bus to see the state capitol, Poveromo Jolie packed up the family, rented an Airbnb, and did their own tour of St. Augustine. Do I talk to a lot of the people from our old life? No, unfortunately, she says. For a while, people tried to make it work, but sometimes you do lose relationships. The adjustments can take work. Let me call 10 dentists and see which one is still wearing masks, Poveromo Jolie says of a recent effort. But the changes have also come with benefits. Poveromo Jolie says they spend much more time together, their life is less hectic, and their daughter, who was diagnosed with dyslexia, gets more personalized instruction. So Poveromo Jolie has stopped thinking of their pandemic-era changes as temporary, and stopped hoping that they could be. Okay, but we still need to recognize the fact she was, in fact, forced into this situation by an uncaring society. All right. Emily Landon, an infectious disease specialist at the University of Chicago Medicine, understands the concerns of people like Poveromo Jolie. Though acute COVID is, quote, largely survivable because of advances in therapeutics and vaccines, she says, there are still very real risks related to long COVID, including prolonged illness, cardiac conditions, and neurological symptoms. There are good reasons to avoid getting COVID, she says. I can't even believe that this is like something you have to remind people of. There are good reasons not to get HIV. There are good reasons not to get polio. There are good reasons not to get COVID, she says, such as the possibility of those longer-term effects. Landon, not to mention, even during the acute phase, you can get 2 years' worth of lung damage. You can end up with a pacemaker because your heart got damaged during your infection. I mean, it's just crazy. Landon still wears her mask when she heads to the grocery store. People who take care of patients who've had long COVID, she says, are a little shy about getting COVID. Boy, is this article afraid to just touch on this subject more directly. The still COVIDing Facebook groups are made up of people like Poveromo Jolie looking for each other and for things like extra careful dentists. In the last month, members of a Mid-Atlantic group posted queries looking for veterinarians and eye doctors who were still wearing masks and occupational therapists who would still do virtual appointments. 2019 is gone. It's gone, and it's not coming back, says Cara Darling, the moderator of that group and several others like it. So at my house, we've had a lot of long conversations about what makes a life worth living. Darling is a partner in a network of medical clinics that provide care coordination for people with complex diseases. 3 of her 4 kids have a rare condition called autoimmune encephalitis, in which their immune systems can cause debilitating inflammation of the brain. Darling says that when her son got hand, foot, and mouth disease, that's what we were just talking about, tomato flu, a common childhood virus that's generally mild, it took him 2 years to fully recover. Getting COVID is just not an option for my kids to stay functional, she says. Occasionally, Darling feels frustrated towards people who opt not to don masks in shared spaces like doctors' offices and pharmacies, but mostly she's upset that federal health agencies aren't issuing stricter guidelines. Or, fuck it, like we need to go beyond guidelines. How about mandates? She worries that people walking around maskless in crowded spaces don't have enough information. That's exactly what I was just saying. Don't have enough information about the potential dangers of long-term COVID damage, especially from multiple infections. So people are just not, this is not an informed consent situation. People are not consenting on an informed basis. They don't have the information about the risk that they're taking. I feel really sorry for them, she says, because they don't know what they're doing to their bodies, what they're doing to their brains. And we've talked about that many times. COVID, even mild COVID, can cause brain shrinkage, like equivalent to 10 years worth of aging. It's really bad. I believe if people are given the right information, 9 times out of 10, they'll make the right choices. And I think to some extent, yes, but the U.S. is really bad at doing stuff on a society-wide level. It's very atomized, very individualistic. People just are not members of a lot of institutions, organizations that have some bearing on the fabric of society and government policy especially. There have been costs to her own approach. The family moved from Colorado to Delaware in late 2020, but Darling says her husband couldn't take the seclusion anymore and moved back to Colorado. He was just done, she says. Her oldest daughter, interesting, by the way. Her oldest daughter, a 21-year-old former theater kid who long dreamed of being a performer, has had to rethink her career path. And when one of Darling's sisters had a new baby this year, the sister asked when Darling would come to meet the child. I said, I really want to see your baby. I love all the pictures, she recalls. But are you going to take the week off before we come and then the week while we're there? And she said, no, I can't really do that. The visit never happened, Darling said. She doesn't fault her sister or even her husband. It is what it is, she says. I've seen big rifts, people who don't even speak to their family members anymore. I just need to be practical and know how I can keep my family safe. Ariella Cohen-Coleman does harbor some resentment. We'd be more comfortable going out into the world if people would just show people some respect. Good luck with that from Americans. And put on a mask, says Cohen-Coleman, who has a constellation of genetic conditions that trigger severe immune system responses. She worries that an infection could be lethal. At the start of the pandemic, the healthcare attorney felt a renewed sense of solidarity. Finally, it seemed like people understood a little bit of what it's like for her to live with chronic illness, to stay home all the time, to be in seclusion. In the early days of the pandemic, people were checking on each other, she says. And, oh, there we go. This is the last screen. It's got some more of the same there. Where was I? She says that these days she feels more alone than ever. It's absolutely more isolating now, she says. It makes me feel kind of left behind and forgotten. It's actually the end of the article. So, you know, I'd say a poorly written article. At least it highlighted the existence of people still taking COVID seriously, although I would say that this article, the way that it's written, the way it's framed, plays an active part in marginalizing people. You know, it's like normally people taking COVID seriously are forgotten about, or maybe, you know, and then when we are acknowledged, it is only to sort of mock and marginalize us, to push us out further. All right, so that truly is all the COVID stuff for today. We're going to get back into the chat now because I've been going for quite a while. There we go. Actually, let's thank the patrons. So why not taking a break here? Patreon.com/socialism for all. These fine folks got their name on the screen by heading there and signing up for $2 a month or more. You know, I would make content even if nobody paid. But the contributions allow me to spend a lot more time on it, whether it's actively sitting here and doing the live stream or collecting the stories, doing all the readings, whatever it is. I'm just able to spend a lot more time because people do support. We don't run ads or sponsorships. I don't believe that commercialism has any place in communist media whatsoever. So plus advertising and things, I think, help the corporations and the platform much more than they help the, you know, the content creator. So anyway, thanks to the patrons. This is key. If you like this channel, thank me, of course. Thank other people who send in stories and things, but definitely thank the patrons and consider becoming one yourself. Also, like, share, subscribe. That engagement helps YouTube to promote this content. So anyway, all of that is appreciated, and it's why this channel is consistently growing and becoming a bigger and bigger hub in the community. So anyway, appreciate all those contributions. All right, so about that chat, what were we talking about? A bunch of people mentioning my appearance on the Thin Blue Lies podcast last week, which we did instead of Thursday's stream. And yeah, it was good to appear there with Sal from the Red Army, and we talked about basically cops and residences and how they don't mix, and how government policy allows for destruction of people's residences and injuries and deaths during that without any accountability due to things like qualified immunity. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go check that out. There's a link in the S4A community post section on YouTube, just a couple of posts down. So let's see. And somebody asking about the First Amendment audit cop watchers to libertarian pipeline. And there's somebody adds, cop audits are hilarious. There was this severely autistic kid I used to live by in West Tennessee that would just stalk cops and record them while they would just lose their shit. Grown armed men screaming at this innocent kid but not able to do anything. Since he isn't breaking any laws, And I was talking about this before. We don't have a strong left currently in the U.S. It's growing. It's better than it was 10 years ago, but it really is still kind of in its infancy or, you know, early childhood at this point, at least for sort of the current time period. And so a lot of people don't really, they may have problems with the system. For example, like they might be, you know, uh, civil rights advocates that rightly target the many, many police related injustices in the US, but they tend to do their thinking within the framework of capitalism. So we're existing to try to break people out and show people that all of this stuff is connected. Like the police are there because of private property, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, because of class struggle in general. So they're there to enforce the will of the bourgeoisie and private property, just capitalist interests generally, and you can't really separate those out. So libertarians will say we're anti-cop, but then they're for private property. Those things don't really go hand in hand. They might fight for a more lenient system of enforcing, the dictatorship of capital, but you can only get so far within that. Or they'll say that they're anti-war, but then be for capitalism. And capitalism became imperialism 100 years ago, and imperialism requires constant expansion through war if necessary. And so you can't be really libertarian. You can't be for capitalism and anti-war. You can't be for capitalism and anti-cop. You just can't. And somebody else points out that the real thing is it's not so much don't tread on. Where was the thing? It's that the Gadsden flag of like don't tread on me, and it's more like tread on someone else. Like they need that cop system there. They just don't like it when they end up being the victims of it. All right, anyway, so I have so many friends who are, quote, getting sick and wondering why. They're like, I think I got the flu, as if there wasn't a world changing pandemic that started, I don't know, less than 2 years ago. Never underestimate denial. Really, never underestimate denial. The U.S. is fighting how many like wars, like active combat zones across the world? Ask the average person about that. I mean, it's just, the denial is very, very strong. Yeah, I know too many people who have caught COVID because they wanted to hang out with people but let their barriers down, etc. I don't know how many times I heard, yeah, I was really strict about COVID, and then I just got sick of it, and I went to go do something, and I got sick like in the first week. Yeah, that's what happens. That's, that's why we needed all these measures, the mask mandates and everything else. Those were there for a reason, and we need them again. I watched the movie Reds recently. Yeah. It's a Warren Beatty biopic about John Reed. He wrote 10 Days That Shook the World. I wanted to like it, but it was bad. Watching it, you realize how much influence Trotsky had on it. It's essentially anti-communist. I've actually only seen particular scenes from that movie. Good to know, as I eventually will be watching that. Yeah, I mean, Trotskyism is very common in the West, particularly like English speaking, the UK and the US. Far, far, far too much Trotskyism. Speaking of, now we know how insufferable Trotskyists can be with their, that wasn't real socialism and everything else. I had a tangle. I think this was my second brief tangle with an anarchist, just rabid, foaming at the mouth, hothead anarch. Has actually a comparably sized YouTube channel to S4A right now. And it's one of the very first requests that I had at S4A was to do a response video to a video series that Anarch had done. And I sat down to attempt it, and it was such a mishmash of like ridiculously bad talking points that I literally just I didn't know where to begin, and I I mean, it's like 4 hours worth of videos, maybe longer. And I was just like, there's no possible way I can do this. I might reattempt that again sometime as we enter the fourth year. I feel like we spent a decent amount of time in late 2021 through 2022 attacking these sort of Nazbol, Patsock, chauvinist, basically emerging neo-fascism masquerading as Marxism. And I think that that was taken on pretty successfully, and we worked through a lot of readings on the channel related to nationalism and internationalism and war and you know popular fronts supporting the bourgeoisie, not supporting them, and various questions around that. I One of the driving forces for me in doing S4A is I think that the U.S. left, is particularly the far left, needs to overcome its anarchist phase. Specifically, just this sort of petty bourgeois individualism that drives. The U.S. is a country made up mostly of proletarians in terms of the actual class status or class standing, the class position of people in the U.S. is mostly proletarian, like overwhelming, like 90% of the U.S. is proletarian. And of course, this is complicated by international factors like being a labor aristocracy within the imperialism hierarchy around the world. But just looking at the U.S. at least, mainly proletarian with respect to the domestic means of production. However, all of these U.S. proletarians largely are suffering, largely, from a petty bourgeois individualist consciousness. Imitating the bourgeoisie in various ways, thinking of ourselves in individual rather than class terms. And I would like to really start taking that on more and more. That might be sort of as the sort of Nazbol Patsock thing was a theme for the past year. It may become more of a theme for the next year, because you got a country of proletarians who don't think of themselves as proletarians, and even when they do get into the far left, are still thinking in this sort of petty bourgeois individualist kind of thing. And I think, and that includes anarchism, and that needs to be just beaten down and just battered to pieces as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that may be one of the things that we take on. That's at least the best idea I've had so far. As far as, I think especially after unearthing that the Patsocks and all that, it was really like, when Lyndon LaRouche met Dugin in terms of the waves of influence colliding. And, a lot of that happened through sort of Russia, to a lesser extent Dugin in China, but LaRouche and Schiller Institute are definitely, seem to be active within the liberal factions within China. And so you get this sort of, competing imperialism, definitely suffused with and interwoven with Duginist neo-fascism and LaRoucheist neo-fascism as well. And I feel like now that that has sort of been fully teased out through these many skirmishes across the last year, obviously not just at S4A, many people have been fighting with the Maupins and the Infracells and the Jackson Hewitts and all these different, to a lesser extent, Peter Coffin, and then the armies of anonymous Infracell, PFP, mecha tanky people. They're just fascists. But especially now that it's been tied to LaRouche and all that, I feel like it's lost a lot of its punch. And where to go next. And that's kind of what I have my sights on for now. We'll see if a better idea comes up, but that's one of the things I'd like to take on. That, we're here to help the U.S. left primarily. I mean, obviously this is an international movement. I'm in the U.S. The majority of the audience is in the U.S., so that's where I put most of the emphasis. I would like to see the U.S. left become more internationalist, less individualist, more effectively anti-fascist, and so on. So, more effectively anti-imperialist. So this means understanding things like what is imperialism, what is fascism, what is, nationalism, what is social imperialism, what's social chauvinism. We already have a lot of things up on the channel about that. I want to get into take on anarchism a bit more in the coming years. So anyway, just putting a few thoughts out there. If people want to, share their favorite resources on that, I can start working it into the flow. You may not see it for months, but then, the opportune time pops up and we go there then. And this isn't, there's a lot of anarchists who are people with, decent hearts and they don't like capitalism, etc. But anarchism as an ideology, it gets it backwards. It seeks the liberation of the individual on an individual basis rather than on a class basis. And it's always putting the individual first before everything. And that's just not really, we're engaged in class struggle and things need to be framed in those terms. So I'd love to see more people get, pulled over out of that individualist camp. So, all right. I need more socialist friends. Every time I talk with comrades in the party, I feel so much more alive than with normies. Yeah, I mean, you realize that people who've developed their class consciousness are just more capable of functioning on the full spectrum of what's going on in reality. You realize, in other words, that people who have been shying away from that class consciousness are tuning a lot of really important shit out, and sometimes there is active mental gymnastics involved in that. And so you're dealing a lot of times with people who, they've had their brushes with developing class consciousness, blah blah, developing class consciousness. There was a lot of opportunities to insert H's into those words, and I took most of them. But who have shied away from, really following down those trains of thought to become more radicalized. People who haven't, who've embraced that rather than shying away from it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they're just firing on more cylinders. So yeah, I would agree with that. I'm in a right-wing southern city, so not too many socialists. I'm agitating within the union I'm in, but it's such a long process. Yeah, I mean, obviously you're surrounded by working class people, but whether they are thinking using proletarian ideology in a proletarian class lens, or whether they have absorbed bourgeois ideology, that's kind of more the question. So somebody says, I pretty much stay home all day unless I have to go outside for important reasons. That said, I can still get COVID if my mom somehow got COVID. I know because some people got COVID even when they stay home all day when their family members are going outside. Yeah, the masks are key when you do go outside. Definitely. I started my own mutual aid organization and it helped get more people who are leftist or sympathetic to join in, etc. Even made friends. That's good. Made friends with people. Would love to hear more about your story about starting a mutual aid organization. In the last stream, number 71, we started. Somebody had asked previously how to do anti-fascist research. And so we read an introductory brief pamphlet from Rose City Antifa about that. And we're going to continue that either today or tomorrow. It's in this week's batch of streams. Notice that time I didn't make a specific timing promise that I knew I couldn't keep. But yeah, that is in the hopper for the today and tomorrow. We're going to expand on how to do anti-fascist work. But yeah, we'd love to hear about your experience starting a successful mutual aid organization. Do you think policemen should be regarded as workers by a communist party and vote for allowances given to them by the bourgeois government just for the sake of some, quote, good cops? There has been much debate about this issue last week. Yeah, the immediate next comment is there are no good cops because the good cops, quote unquote, are there. There's basically two choices that a quote good or ethical person who enters the profession of doing police work faces. You either stand by your ethics and wind up quitting because the system will not change, or you stay in there and you wind up turning a blind eye to and tacitly endorsing and supporting all of the horrifically unethical things that are going on in the name of police work. So, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, my orientation is that the police are to be regarded as agents of the capitalist class, and I mean that's whose will they're out there enforcing. So no, you know, that's not a thing that we want to be supporting people in doing. Generally speaking, there are certain like public safety functions that police do, um, enforce, and that we currently don't have functioning alternatives to do. Things that aren't related to property law, but like violent crime and personal safety. There's a few things like that that are, you could say valid functions that would be, there would be some apparatus for dealing with that, even in a, socialist society. But no, as far as now, regarding police as workers, they're there to break strikes and evict people from houses, and they're class enemies. So yeah, not generally. So I didn't see most of that debate, and I'd be curious. I know you were in a party previously. How does your party treat that issue? Has anyone heard of the Platypus Society or the International Marxist Tendency? Trotskyist video that got on my feed. Yeah, we've talked about platypus a couple of times. I think it's also known as the Platypus Affiliated Society. My understanding is that they are basically trot or trot adjacent, and we don't really go for that here. And yeah, IMT, International Marxist Tendency, is Trotskyist as well. I love their website is very like well designed and laid out, and they do produce a lot of articles and media that is appealing looking, and I would love to see more stuff like that, but just from people who aren't Trotskyists. Yeah. And so people brought up in relation to the police thing, it's like joining the U.S. Marines to stop imperialism. Yeah, the entire system is set up to maintain imperialism. Now, it was one of the terms of admission to the Comintern back when the Comintern existed, and we really need something like that again today. I mean, there are some international communist cooperative associations between parties going on. We've talked about some of that when we do the In Defense of Communism articles that, for example, release statements from the UCU, Union of Communists of Ukraine, and some other communist groups and parties and youth leagues and things like that. So SolidNet is another website that features work from various communist parties that do cooperate with each other. I mean, the thing about the Comintern, obviously, was it had so much momentum. You had the Bolsheviks in there, fresh off their revolution, and sort of trying to Bolshevize the other parties. So, I mean, that's why that was so successful, I would say. We do need something like that again. But anyway, one of the terms of admission was that the party is actively conducting work within the military, because you do want some section of the military to be, at a minimum, sympathetic to communist revolution, that maybe they might stand down in the event of, strikes and revolutionary type actions. So there's that. But yeah, as far as just supporting the average sort of, head in the game, like chud officer or soldier, no. Greetings from the Kamloops Club of the Communist Party of Canada. Thank you, S4A, for putting out such great readings. We've put great use to them in our educationals. Okay, well, Good. My response is pretty much the same every time somebody says that. I'm glad you're listening, and I'm glad that it's helpful. You know, I started this channel because I wanted to do more reading, and I wanted, like I said before in my whole thing about individualism, I wanted to help the left, sort of U.S. centric, English speaking left, to get better, to take the next steps in its development. And I wanted to help put out resources to that end and share some of my experiences as well. And good. I'm glad that we're coming up on 12,000 subscribers now. It's been consistently growing. I'm glad that people are making use of this. I'm glad it's helpful, and I do try to stay engaged so that it continues to be helpful. So good. It's insane how quickly the coverage of China went from nonstop protests and evil COVID lockdowns to COVID is out of control in China, especially considering that China still has I will add, tiny fraction of the daily cases of the US in raw numbers, despite its being, well, I don't think it's 8 times larger, but significantly larger. Yeah. Well, and you could say it's hypocrisy. I mean, it's just they're going to attack China no matter what, because the point is attacking China. That's no matter what China does. I mean, yeah, they're hypocritical about it for sure. It's just constant, not even double standards. I mean, we're up to quintuple standards. I mean, they just keep changing it. No matter what China does, it's just wrong for a new reason. But yeah, it's like they can highlight any. I was reading a good thread about this recently. No matter, um, China's a country of over a billion people. Okay, I think it's between 1.3 and 1.4 billion people. So there's a lot of people there. It has about a billion more people than the U.S. I mean, the fact that there are protests going on in China, in and of itself, does not mean a whole lot. There's a lot of people there, and they don't all think like in lockstep. So yeah, I mean, there's especially now that they're allowing significant amounts of capitalism. Okay, you kind of have a petty bourgeoisie, and they're going to be mimicking some of the petty bourgeois attitudes from the West, the anti-lockdown stuff, and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's exasperating. Okay, I don't even know what this comment means. Underground socialism is just the step to communism. I hope you are living in some red country. I don't really know exactly what that means, but okay. The liberal COVID minimization is becoming unbearable. Yeah, we'll see what things are like in the spring after everybody goes through COVID. In the winter, we're coming up on a big surge again, and I don't even know. We just booster bandited our toddler, the Moderna bivalent. They're so damn gate kept. Yeah. So, what was your process for that? And he says, I'm going to get Novavax, but still do everything the same, like I have no protection at all. Yeah, that's the idea, is in N95 we trust. It's all about the mask. It's all about not going into big crowds where people are packed together. It's all about avoiding all of that. The vaccine is just if there's a mask fail or something like that. That's what it's for. But, even if you're fully vaccinated, you're still have decent odds of getting significantly sick. Better odds than if you weren't vaccinated. You're more protected, but you still don't want to chance that. So one of the talking points about China too is that the lockdowns negatively affected the immune system of the people. Yeah, that's the quote immunity debt that we were talking about before. It's a complete lie. So what's happening right now in Sweden, the country that famously was like pioneering that herd immunity approach of like not doing lockdowns and stuff. This was back in 2020. They, made headlines for sort of arguing for just letting it rip, even back in 2020, in order to reach, quote, herd immunity. What we've actually done is herd immunity is a complete myth. What we've actually done is just created highly mutated COVID strains that are now very immune evasive. So that's what we've actually done. So yeah, this is immunity debt stuff. Oh, that the lockdown has hurt our immune systems. No, fucking COVID hurt our immune systems. That's demonstrable. So I wish we had exopacks, the mask that the humans wear while on Pandora from James Cameron's Avatar. If we had masks like that, we could have avoided such mass-scale death and injury from COVID-19. Then again, even if we made real-life exopacks, which appear to be more comfortable and protective than N95s, conservatives would still complain about freedom. At the very, I mean, they were telling people to like inject yourself with bleach back then. I would not weigh that, their opinions too heavily. At the very least, they'd be the first to die from Pandora's toxic atmosphere. Yeah, the thing though about COVID is that it persists, and it, you can survive it but still keep spreading it. And look at Bolsonaro. There's somebody did a collage of pictures of Bolsonaro in the hospital, and there's like a million pictures. Like he had COVID like 8 times. Many jokes about how many strains of COVID Bolsonaro made like single-handedly. But anyway, as far as exopacks, you're talking basically about P100s. So P100s are considered the gold standard for preventing respiratory infection if you're working with highly contagious respiratory airborne diseases that can spread through the respiratory system. COVID is, of course, a lot more than just a respiratory, just a disease that affects your lungs and respiratory system. It gets in through that way very easily, but it affects your entire body, nervous system, heart, lungs, kidney, gut, immune system, all of it. But yeah, P100, that's considered the gold standard. You can get P100s for like $30. As elastomeric masks, that's the kind of gas mask looking mask. And yeah, like I said, $30 might be a bit more with shipping. And then it has the little canisters on the outside. You can, I understand, also get like paper P100s that aren't the elastomeric. Elastomerics are probably going to last you longer for cheaper, but then again, I mean, there's N99s. So that number in it, the 100 filters 100%, the N95 filters 95%, and the N99 filters 99%. You get the idea. So, I mean, solutions exist for sure. What you need is a solid seal around your mouth and nose. That's the problem with the surgical masks. They don't have a seal on the sides. So you need the N95 or similar. Isn't it shocking how many trolls pop up on left-wing videos and streams? You never see the opposite because it's a waste of time and we aren't mouth breathers like the fascists. Yeah, that's why I moderate comments. So I have comments set to, I have to manually approve them. So I have to publish comments on the YouTube. And that has dramatically improved my experience of running the channel. Because I know that when, in days when I don't feel like logging in and like checking the comments, I know that people aren't posting fucking garbage, which they do. I mean, it's people hate and fear socialism for a variety of reasons. Usually they're not very well informed, and that is reflected pretty much all the time in the comments. It's very, very rare that there's any kind of a knowledge-based criticism or something like that. That's one thing. Usually it's just sort of random bashing. But yeah, a lot. Because why? Capitalism is in power, and it's spending billions of dollars a day to spread its ideology in order to stay in power. And so people take it upon themselves, as they're encouraged to do, to become the random, street level enforcers of capitalist thinking. So they see somebody who is diverging from that, who is going against that, who is advocating for people, agitating, educating, and organizing against that, to get rid of it, to abolish capitalism. And yeah, they freak out. So, yeah. Talking about the baby, we had to lock down hard until he could wear his flow mask at about 20 months. And once he finally got vaccinated around 30 months, we started going into grocery stores and stuff again. New normal, Lamau. Imagine having nothing else to do with your life except to be a shit troll 20 years after trolling stopped being a semi-funny thing to do on MySpace. These people have no creativity, friends, lives, or even a scrap of self-respect. I fully agree. I will never look before I cross a road. I refuse to live in fear. Fuck stop signs too, and fully cooking food. Couldn't agree more. I guess we missed a troll in here. Thank you, Mod, for taking care of that. That RAT data chart, that was the rapid test chart I showed, is so damn informative and useful. Imagine having this in front of you when the CDC said go back to work 5 days after symptom onset. Yeah. I would love to see the CDC give one of their pseudoscience presentations in front of the RAT chart or BioBot. Yep. Yeah, it's like they just don't acknowledge it. I mean, they clearly don't account for it, but they don't even acknowledge it most of the time. Welcome. Hello to you in Toronto. Oh yeah, so Trump. We covered last week in last week's stream that Trump had an announcement that America needs a superhero. Blah blah blah. Turned out the announcement was for the Trump NFTs, which they sold out really quickly. But I think that was actually just scalpers because then people were reselling them and the value dropped by 50% like within a day. So yeah, so tone deaf. People were comparing them to Garbage Pail Kids, and that was, I thought, there were a lot of good. Actually, let me dig. I saved all the. Who doesn't love a good Garbage Pail Kid? There are a bunch of them. Where is it? Here's one. Touchy feely Trump. This was about like they were hideous. NFTs are fucking stupid and ugly usually, and Trump's though in particular, that is my favorite. I love that toupee Trump. Just the face and the hair, just is it's haunting. What else? I know there's two more of these. Come on. Oh, there's more. What, I have 6 of these? Discount Donald. See, I've collected the whole set, and it was 100% free. Dodgy Donald. And the funny thing about this is, like, Trump was, a major media figure at the time when Garbage Pail Kids were a thing. So it's like some of these like could have actually been real. Donald Dump. There we go. I guess that was like a different one that people just sort of modified. And Tax Dodge and Donald. All right, there we go. Yeah. All right. Here in the fairly rural South, I haven't seen a mask in months. I've even gotten some comments from people I don't even know making fun of me for it when I'm getting food. I was reading somebody on Twitter, like a woman went into a store and like it was like accosted by somebody about it. I mean, it's pretty bad. When it comes to people on the left, I just don't get why they're against COVID safety. It lets you participate in so many less capitalisms. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the thing I think of people saying. Well, it's louder, stirring my drink. It kind of does make you refocus. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to go out shopping, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. And it's like suddenly you realize you've reclaimed your life from many of the spaces that capitalism had sort of culturally mandated you to participate in. And it's like, oh, actually, my life is actually better now. So most of these still coveting Facebook groups have opened up and are unreadable at this point. There's a couple of good ones still. Okay. Are there any that you would recommend? But if people are on Facebook, go check that out. You know, that a lot of people have talked about, looking for community that are still concerned about COVID. At my work, I've gone from the only one wearing a mask to one of almost everyone, and back again, twice. And now more people are starting to mask up again. I don't understand them. Vibes based COVID protocols. Yeah, it's like maybe if you just wore the mask consistently, we would stop getting these big upsurges. COVID killed 1 million Americans, yet asking most people to use a mask is going too far. But 3,500 people die on 9/11, and let's go, yeah, invade multiple countries over it. Patriotism is a bitch. Yeah. My partner's therapist started telling her that we should go to restaurants again, and I was like, stay in your lane, doc. It is insanity. Literally, ew, you're going to allow something actively threatening your life to affect your behavior? Completely ass backwards logic. This is how distorted people have really bought into the point of well, we covered on the channel the Eat Out to Help Out campaign in the UK. How pathetic is it that you're like, I'm doing my patriotic duty. I went and bought French fries at a restaurant. Oh my God, when your patriotic duty is like spending money. But see, a lot of people really do think that. At a certain point after 9/11, after they had scared the complete shit out of people, George Bush went out there. This is, of course, W. Bush went out there and was like, don't let the terrorists win. You got to keep shopping. A lot of people really kind of take that to heart. I think a lot more than they would like to admit. I think a lot more people buy into that at a semi conscious and unconscious level than they're really willing to admit about themselves. And that's a problem for all of us. Because then it's like, I'm left. Well, are you though? Because you're still carrying the capitalism virus, the consumerism virus in your head. And we can help each other recover from that and uninfect each other, but it does take a concerted effort. I have really enjoyed being a hermit since my partner passed last year. I'm sorry that your partner passed. I get enough of the public at work. Doing things alone and away from everyone else is quite fantastic. I'm glad that that is working for you, and again, I'm sorry to hear that. Most people are so boring. We live in a golden age of finding strange abandoned areas of urbanism as well as nature to explore, and they just want to go to bars and restaurants. Yes, this is again reclaiming the imagination from you know places where capitalism has retreated from or hasn't entirely encroached into yet. That's one bad dice roll, folks, and you got long COVID. Yeah, even if you're fully vaccinated, you go out without a mask in a big public space, roll a d6. If it comes up a 1, you got long COVID. Well, sorry, that's if you get infected. So there's a bit more math involved. But yeah, it is one bad dice roll and you got long COVID. So, yeah. What do we think about ideological reconstitution of communism? Probably necessary, as fell into revisionism a long time ago. If you'd like to provide a more detailed prompt, we can maybe talk about it some more. Okay, there is one actually. A few comments down, they posted the same comment with, "Do you know the CXR? They are only in Spain and Mexico for now." I don't. However, that so the basis of um, the basic Marxism Leninism study guide that we've been slowly chipping away at. We're on reading number 21 now on the channel. That's the curriculum of the MAI, Movimiento Antiimperialista. So I don't know if there's any connection. I mean, other than it being in Spanish, I don't know if there's any connection there. But I'll take a look at the website. Thesis of Reconstitution of the Communist Party by the PCR. Let's see. What else do we have? The Revolutionary Proletariat in the Face of the Imperialist War. So this is from reconstitucion.net. That would be the Spanish spelling. Linea Proletaria. Órgano por la Reconstitución. And yes, I'm just reading this with an American accent. Órgano por la Reconstitución Ideológica y Política del Comunismo. Thesis of Reconstitution of the Communist Party. Yeah, this is like way too long to read in the thread, but thank you for the link. I will check this out. I think that there's a lot of defenses of what is clearly revisionism ongoing in the world today, and it's sad to see that. You know, yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. A lot of my old band friends are getting back out and playing like nothing's going on. I miss playing live music and touring from time to time, but it's just too sketchy out there these days, especially going overseas for tours. I rode festivals on pedicab all over the country. All the pedicabbers I know have long COVID. Uh, don't underestimate denial. I felt this yesterday talking about socialism at work, and this libertarian wage worker told me that more funding goes to education than the U.S. military. Haha. Yeah. I don't know. Do they watch just PragerU? Like, where do you even get an idea like that? That's crazy. I mean, clearly they didn't, you know, big education really didn't have their way with that person, clearly. That's why leftists need to be in orgs with each other. We get to enter a cheat code where people share a base level understanding of the world and can get serious work done, not bogged by class unconsciousness. I mean, our role is to organize. This is one of the things when I was sort of encountering that anarchist recently. They're sort of ranting against, quote, vanguardism and how, you know, oh, the vanguard is counter-revolutionary and this and that. The vanguard, so there's the vanguard and the masses. Okay, the vanguard is the most class-conscious detachment of the working class. That's what it is. It's not really any more than that. I mean, in fact, to the extent that this anarchist had studied the history of class struggle, obviously they had reached some incorrect conclusions about it. But to the extent that they had studied class struggle and things like that, and I think are a working class person, they would be the vanguard. Unfortunately, they are bogged down by petty bourgeois individualism in all the anarchism that they're constantly dealing with. But, I mean, most of the anarchists today would be a vanguard of sorts because they're, you know, like learning about history and are more class conscious and things like that. They just haven't made that step from that petty bourgeois individualism out into, you know, more of a proletarian consciousness. So yeah, but the vanguard, people think it's some kind of like conspiracy. It isn't. It's the most class conscious, most, you know, well read, I guess, like history literate section of the working class that is in the best position to lead an organized struggle against capitalism. In other words, the masses don't like being exploited or oppressed and will periodically rise up spontaneously kind of blindly lashing out at a capitalist order and a capitalist ruling class that they don't really understand because they just haven't studied it that much. Like, they see the piece that's in front of them and they rebel against that effectively or ineffectively, but it's not systematic. So the idea of the vanguard is those of us who study this on a consistent, ongoing, week to week basis and get organized about it. This is, this sort of, quote, professional revolutionaries that actually devote ongoing amounts of time to it, not just periodically rising up when things get super bad. But we do this on an ongoing basis. And then when the masses do spontaneously revolt, we try to influence that as much as we can in the most effective and constructive ways possible. It's not some kind of weird conspiracy. It's like there's the vanguard is just the people who have kind of studied this the most, and that's it. Like trying to make it out as inherently counter-revolutionary is like insanely stupid. Yeah, and that was kind of my takeaway from that clash with that anarchist was like, man, I thought, Trotskyists were bad. They make Trotskyists look good. And, yeah, so anyway. Going to give it hell to sleep in tomorrow. It's going to be like minus 312,000 degrees, so I don't want to leave my house. Yeah, the cold sucks. Cold weather is... like, being really overheated sucks too, but I mean, things slow down in winter. Actually, that was a point I kind of wanted to make today. In winter, slow down. I think that a lot of the stuff about the holiday season in December, like the whole run up to New Year's, many people celebrate Christmas, whether you celebrate Hanukkah or something else or nothing at all. There's this general kind of frenzied pace, and it's absolutely driven by commercialism, because all the many businesses are on a calendar year financial year. So like some businesses, your tax filing like financial year doesn't have to be January to December. You can set it as something else. But for many businesses, it is January to December, and so December is the end of their fiscal year. And so they're desperately trying to get people to buy more shit, engage in more commercial activity so that they can get their numbers up by the end of the year. And, they make that problem, which you don't benefit from, they try to make it your problem. And so they, culturally mandate everybody to scramble. But as far as nature, we should be doing the exact opposite thing in December. We should be slowing the fuck down. It means like, if, depends where you're located. Like, some parts of the U.S. South, it really doesn't get that cold and people can still wear maybe just like a long sleeve shirt, with no jacket or anything like that. But, a significant amount of the U.S., it gets really cold where you got to bundle up or you're going to get sick and stuff like that. And people should not be rushing around to prepare for that. You should be slowing down. And to me, it's just been a long-standing pet peeve of the way people handle December. Basically, the time from Thanksgiving on, for like that Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, things start becoming like, oh, we gotta hurry, cram it all in, it's the end of the year. It's the exact opposite thing that people should be doing. You should be slowing down, taking stock of things, settling into winter. I think a lot of people do kind of burn themselves out during that holiday season, and they wind up getting sick in the winter. The most amount of people die in January of the whole year. Well, I mean, it's kind of the whole winter. It's November, December, January, February. There's reasons for that. The cold stresses your immune system, just stresses your whole body. Also, there's less vitamin D because of the reduced sunlight, because the sun, the Earth is tilting away during that time. And, so there's a number of reasons. But the idea is you want to slow down, preserve your sort of inner self, preserve the sort of pilot light in your system, rather than like at the time when everything's slowing down naturally and your body wants to kind of go into... I mean, humans don't hibernate like a bear, but we should slow down in the winter And again, I feel like just the general tenor of December is the exact opposite. I can't fucking stand it. It's so cold, my stepmom's cancer treatments have been canceled until further notice. Didn't know they did that. Yeah, I didn't know they did that either. Interesting. I've never heard of that before. Even in the ML spaces, we still need our class consciousness sharpened. I think anarchism definitely had appeals for me personally, and I still like anarchists online still. Well, so part of the issue now is anyone online can call themselves Marxist-Leninist. You know, it used to be being a Marxist-Leninist meant you were in a Marxist-Leninist party. And the Marxist-Leninist party would have a party line and, you know, readings you would have to do and study groups and stuff like that. And now there's so many people who are like, yeah, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. And they haven't done any of the fucking reading. Like, none of it. So, yeah, that's a big difference between now and then. So, Marxist Leninists should not need dramatic amounts of. Like, the process of becoming a Marxist Leninist, doing those readings, should get you a lot of the way towards the class consciousness that you need. Now, real world participation in struggle is also going to sharpen your class consciousness dramatically. It's going to make the readings make more sense by giving you personal context for them, and so on. And there's just something to be said for just seeing it happen to you right in front of your face. You know, when you're engaged in a struggle against an employer or something more political in the community, whatever it is. But yeah, there's a lot of people just completely half-assing it and treating it just like an identity rather than like a science, you know? Anarchists who embrace Marxism, such as certain YouTubers, are good comrades. So if you're an anarchist, you cannot embrace Marxism, not really, and still be an anarchist. I mean, Marx and Engels, anarchism existed in Marx's and Engels' time. They were not big fans. I mean, that's very, very clear. So if you are, quote, embracing Marxism as an anarchist, you're doing so in a very limited way, and you're not actually listening to Marx. So there's a piece, we did this way back in the spring of 2020 on political indifferentism. Um, where's the thing? Let me bring it up. I mean, also Marx and Engels were contemporaries with some famous anarchists, and like, you know, we did the thing about the uh, the revolution in Spain in the late 1860s and early 70s, and we did Marx and Engels' breakdown of it, and it was like the Bakuninists in work at work in Spain and how they fucked everything up because anarchism doesn't work as an ideology. So I mean, you really can't be Marxist and anarchist at the same time. You really can't. You can be like anti-capitalist as an anarchist, at least in theory. Is anarchism going to get you beyond capitalism? I would say no, but you know, in practice, is it going to get you beyond capitalism? I would say no. But you know, you can have anti-capitalism in common with Marxists, but you cannot be Marxist and anarchist at the same time, because Marx and Engels were anti-anarchist. This is very clear. So here we go. I mean, this audiobook is up on the channel. This is from 1873, and it's after that, you know, Bakuninists at work thing that I was just referencing. Works of Karl Marx, Political Indifferentism, 1873, originally written in French. The working class must not constitute itself a political party. It must not, under any pretext, engage in political action. For to combat the state is to recognize the state, and this is contrary to eternal principles. Workers must not go on strike, for to struggle to increase one's wages, or to prevent their decrease is like recognizing wages. And this is contrary to the eternal principles of the emancipation of the working class. And this is all in quotes, by the way. If in the political struggle against the bourgeois state, the workers succeed only in extracting concessions, then they are guilty of compromise, and this is contrary to eternal principles. All peaceful movements, such as those in which English and American workers have the bad habit of engaging, are therefore to be despised. Workers must not struggle to establish a legal limit to the working day, because this is to compromise with the masters, who can then only exploit them for 10 or 12 hours instead of 14 or 16. They must not even exert themselves in order legally to prohibit the employment in factories of children under the age of 10, because by such means they do not bring to an end the exploitation of children over 10. They thus commit a new compromise, which stains the purity of the eternal principles. Workers should even less desire that, as happens in the United States of America, the state, whose budget is swollen by what is taken from the working class, should be obliged to give primary education to the workers' children, for primary education is not complete education. It is better that working men and working women should not be able to read or write or do sums, or basic math, than that they should receive education from a teacher in a school run by the state. It's far better that ignorance and a working day of 16 hours should debase the working classes than that eternal principles should be violated. Anyway, it goes on for a while, and then in summary of this, in a word, the workers should cross their arms and stop wasting time in political and economic movements. These movements can never produce anything more than short-term results. As truly religious men, they should scorn daily needs and cry out with full voices of faith, "May our class be crucified, may..." So anyway, it goes on. And so Marx responds to all this by saying, it cannot be denied that if the apostles of political indifferentism were to express themselves with this kind of clarity, in which Marx is sort of summing up their positions but satirizing by stating them more overtly, the working class would make short shrift of them and would resent being insulted by these doctrinaire bourgeois and displaced gentlemen who are so stupid or so naive as to attempt to deny to the working class any real means of struggle. For all arms with which to fight must be drawn from society as it is, and the fatal conditions of the struggle have the misfortune of not being easily adapted to the idealistic fantasies which these doctors in social science have exalted as divinities under the names of freedom, autonomy, anarchy. However, the working class movement is today so powerful that these philanthropic sectarians dare not repeat for the economic struggle those great truths which they used incessantly to proclaim on the subject of the political struggle. They are simply too cowardly to apply them any longer to strikes, combinations, single craft unions, laws on the labor of women and children, on the limitation of the working day, etc., etc. So I think that's fairly clear. Marx was clearly for political organizing and for extracting whatever concessions you can get out of the bourgeois state. So read some fucking Marx, people, honestly. I don't mean you in the chat. I mean, yes, read some Marx, but not that the vitriol is not directed towards you. And yeah, there was a comment about the police. Police as we have today cause crime. They don't really stop it. So yeah. So in other words, if you're sincerely embracing Marx, you're no longer an anarchist. That's just how it works. Hey, are you trying to spread fascist, anti-Semitic buzzwords in the chat? Somebody says before you, yeah, no, you're using DEFCON 3 as a anti-Jewish. Get out of the chat. What do you think that in Ukraine communism is equated with National Socialism? Moreover, in their history books, the USSR is considered more evil and bloody than Nazism. I mean, there's no evidence for that. And this strange trends and events in Europe, concentration only about the, quote, Holodomor, which is Nazi propaganda. I mean, what do I think about it? Obviously, I'm a communist, so I don't agree with it. But yeah, this is something that the far right does in general, is that it's like somehow, yeah, communism and Nazism are equal. Also, we have all the same positions as the Nazis, but somehow we're against Nazis. It makes no sense. Like, it's contradictory on its face. So, people who can't see past that obviously have no logic skills at all. So I think the fact that that's taking hold is showing an enormous amount of willful ignorance and denial. I mean, there's a lot more you could say about it, but like on kind of a basic level, that's what I think about it. Wow. Somebody says record lows. The high tomorrow is going to be -4 lows with wind chill in the -50s or less. Ow. I mean, literally, ouch. I watched a video a while back about Siberia, and it was like somebody went to the coldest place in Siberia or something like that where people actually live. And it gets to be like -70 Celsius. Like you literally get frostbite immediately if you step outside without extreme protection. And people don't keep refrigerators. They hang like their stuff outside. They hang like whole fish outside the window because why would you pay to run a freezer when it's that cold outside? But yeah, just everything is like iced over. And anyway, I think that would be hard. But I mean, I guess there's indigenous people who've been living there since forever. But boy, would that not be my my own preference. I just think it would be like hard to live because it'd just be just such a constant struggle. I mean, I know their culture must be totally oriented around like giving human life meaning in that setting, but to me it just wow, that would be so much work. Just I mean, you're constantly in like a life-threatening situation. The dangerous part is that there is a kernel of truth to the claim that compromising within the capitalist system will slow down progress towards a more equal future. No, there isn't. It's about how you use it. Marx wrote about this. Lenin wrote about this. You, if you're skillful in your propaganda and you're skillful in your persuasion, no matter what happens, you can, spin it in a revolutionary direction. So no, that is not inherently true. Um, that's not inherently true at all. It really isn't. It's kind of a long discussion argument going on about like corruption. Hey, I think hypnotized. Maybe you should sit this one out for a while because you're just getting aggro with people, and you should stop. So, gonna time you out for a while there. All right, anyway, so we're actually caught up with the chat. This has been a very busy chat. There's 52 people in here. I turned raids off because I like the chat to be not flooded so that we can actually have a conversation. And so far, we are 2 hours and 24 minutes into this session, about 2 hours into the video. And we're finally just catching up with the chat now. So, tell you what, we maybe got another half an hour or so. Let me dig through the bag here. We had briefly looked at the anti-fascism article. I think that's actually too long for right now, but I would like to do something else. So let's take a look at it. We were just talking about police. Let's do this article. And this is kind of fun. I mean, in a limited way, it's fun. It's about cats, so that's kind of fun. So this is from AL.com. Alabama is a U.S. state, and this is from that. So the headline is, y'all have 3 cop cars because I'm feeding cats? 2 Alabama women found guilty in trial over feral felines. This is from December 14, a week ago. And unfortunately, that stupid pop-up is blocking the caption, but the story is by Amy Yurkanin. So let's get into this. This is kind of... You want to see U.S. police in action? Here you go. A municipal judge in a small Alabama city found 2 women guilty Tuesday on all charges in a case that started when they were caught feeding and trapping cats on public property near the courthouse. Wetumpka Municipal Judge Jeff Courtney sentenced 61-year-old Mary Alston and 85-year-old Beverly Roberts to 2 years unsupervised probation and $50 in fines, plus court costs for each charge. 2 years unsupervised probation. Just, why would you do this? He also added a suspended sentence of 10 days in jail for both women. Wait till you hear the details. The unusual hearing lasted all day and featured testimony by 3 Wetumpka police officers. They spent all fucking day on this. Stunning. 3 police officers, a county official, the director of a national organization dedicated to the care of feral cats, the mayor, and others. Alston and Roberts both face charges of criminal trespassing. Roberts is also charged with disorderly conduct, and Alston faced charges of interfering with government operations. All misdemeanors. The arrests in the small city north of Montgomery attracted national attention from animal rights organizations. The hearing was held in the Wetumpka City Council chambers with Special Prosecutor Brad Ekdahl from Prattville in front of the municipal judge. Supporters of Roberts and Alston filled about 2/3 of the seats, of course, which also included local and national reporters from CBS. Wetumpka police officers arrested Alston and Roberts on the morning of June 25th. A story about the arrests appeared first in the Montgomery Advertiser in October. Wetumpka police officer Brendan Foster said that when he arrived on the county-owned property near the courthouse between 8 and 9 a.m., get ready, he found Alston in possession of Fancy Feast. That is a brand of cat food. Suspect is in possession of Fancy Feast. The 61-year-old from Wetumpka told him that she was trapping feral cats, and Foster told her to stop or she would be arrested for trespassing. Video from the officers' cameras showed at least 3 patrol cars surrounding Alston's vehicle, which was parked near a wooded area where she had placed her traps. "Y'all have 3 cop cars because I'm feeding cats?" Alston asked in the video. "It's unbelievable." Foster and other officers returned later that morning and saw Alston's car still on the scene. Roberts, 85, had joined her and was sitting inside her car when the officers came back. A trespass order had already been issued against Roberts for feeding cats in the past, so officers arrested her. Roberts became angry when Wetumpka police officer Jason Crumpton placed handcuffs on her wrists. She slapped her keys into Foster's hands and called him a son of a bitch. "You all are unbelievable. This is what you're wasting city gas on." Alston was arrested after she spoke up as Roberts was questioned. Officer Foster said he repeatedly told Alston to leave. In the video, he told her to get in her car. Foster grabbed Alston's arm and pulled her out of her car and to her feet before handcuffing her. Now, this arguably wasn't the smartest approach to just... so I don't know what she was saying at the time, but I mean, clearly they were not exactly de-escalating the situation. I mean, if you follow, things related to U.S. police, there may have been a different way to go about this, like maybe getting more support for doing it before digging in like this. I don't know all the background. That said, the situation is still completely fucked. So anyway, she was arrested because she was feeding cats, defense attorney Terry Luck said. Is that correct? No, she was arrested for criminal trespassing, Foster said. Wetumpka Mayor Jerry Willis said that he saw Alston's parked car and called the assistant chief of police. Wow, what a good mayor, who sent 3 patrol vehicles. He said he had some interactions with Roberts and Alston before the arrest and acknowledged that Roberts had challenged him in the past about animal control ordinances. He said he did not order police officials to arrest the women. What did he think they were going to do? They have a right to make those decisions, Willis said. I don't make those decisions for them. Yeah, but you knew what they were probably likely to do. A county official testified that feral cats had created problems since early 2021 in a parking lot for county vehicles. Richard Bayer, chief operations officer for Elmore County, said cat food and trash from a nearby establishment also attracted buzzards. Bayer said that the cats and buzzards caused thousands of dollars in damage to vehicles. He said that included one incident when cats allegedly burrowed through the firewall, a steel barrier between the engine and passenger cab, and into a truck. Those are some strong cats, let me tell you. An expert on feral cats later testified that such behavior would be more common among rodents, and that cats typically don't chew through metal. Yeah, cats don't do shit like that. Rodents would. Why? Because rodent teeth just keep growing, so they have to keep gnawing on stuff. And so they're constantly gnawing on things because they have to grind their teeth down. Cats, not so much. They don't have great, like, grinding teeth. They have sharp, pointy teeth that are good for stabbing things. Not so much for grinding through steel. Attorneys for so it's like people making claims like that. Can you take this seriously? Not really. Attorneys for Roberts and Alston said that the women were baiting and trapping the cats to have them fixed, which helped to reduce the stray cat problem. Okay. So in other words, if you're concerned about the cats and they're chewing through steel or whatever the fuck, you know, you would want to have fewer of them, which is exactly what they were doing. But Bayer said that the food was attracting more cats and wildlife to the area. Bayer said he offered to have county workers trap the cats and move them to her home, an offer she declined. We asked her on multiple occasions to stop feeding those cats, Bayer said. Again, just was the arrest necessary? That's what I keep coming back to here. Stephen Tiers, director of the Montgomery Humane Society, was asked whether trap, neuter, return programs are a nuisance to the public. No, it's to fix the nuisance of the feral cats, Tiers said. Tiers said that so this is a guy who's an expert. He's at the Humane Society. He knows what he's talking about. He's not some asshole cop with a chip on his shoulder. Tiers said that programs to trap, neuter, and return cats have proved successful in other areas of the country. Gasp, no, not evidence. The Humane Society has invested thousands in Montgomery County to fix the cat problem, Tiers said. Alice Burton, director of programs for Alley Cat Allies, a feral cat advocacy group that supports programs to trap, neuter, and return, spoke after the trial. Compassion is not a crime, Burton said. These are good Samaritans that should be applauded, not handcuffed. Defense attorneys argued that the trespass order against Roberts only applied to the dumpster area near the courthouse. Officers arrested her and Alston at another location between 50 and 100 yards away. That's pretty far away. That is half to a full football field away, according to testimony. The attorneys also said that the trespass order was too vague and was never made in writing. Yeah. Fundamentally, Luck said a person cannot be trespassed from public property unless they're committing a crime. Feeding cats isn't a crime, he said. You can't prevent a citizen from being on public property doing something that the First Amendment allows them to do just because someone doesn't like it, Luck said. The prosecutor said that the city and county had good reason to prevent the women from feeding and trapping feral cats. The testimony here has been ample about the damage, the destruction, the monetary loss. Ekdahl said there's absolutely a valid reason to ask these ladies not to do this. End of article. So in other words, ignore all the expert testimony and keep insisting that cats are digging through steel. Just complete fucking nonsense. But anyway, lightens it up a bit. Speaking of other petty and not so petty injustices, we got this story here. This is from the Daily Dot. Amazon announces a new holiday driver tip pool that's just 0.0005% of its net worth. The company will give $5 to drivers who receive thank yous from customers through the Alexa app. So again, this is sort of like the reporting your own rapid test. Like, how many people are going to do this or even know about it? This is by Jacob Seitz from December 8. In 2021, Amazon drivers were overworked, harassed, and underpaid, especially during the holiday season. This year, the tech mega giant will give their drivers a $5 tip if their customer says, "Alexa, thank my driver." The new initiative, announced by the company on Wednesday, seeks to provide customers with the opportunity to say thanks. Amazon said that the first million thank yous will give each driver a $5 bonus at no cost to the customer. So only the first million. Okay, how many drivers are out there? On top of that, the top thanked drivers will receive $10,000, with $10,000 going to a charity of their choice. Hey, maybe even the same charity that will be feeding them this winter. The company pitched the pseudo-tipping gimmick as a way for customers to thank delivery drivers while not actually paying them more. Quote, "We love hearing the countless stories from customers about the many ways delivery drivers make their lives better," the company said. "We're excited for this new opportunity to thank these everyday heroes and giving our customers the ability to help us do it." Meanwhile, Amazon is being sued by the DC Attorney General over allegations that the company misled consumers by using tips to cover delivery people's base pay. The allegations were previously settled in a Federal Trade Commission or FTC case last year, but Attorney General Carl Racine is seeking to revive the claims. "My office is suing Amazon for stealing tips from delivery drivers through a deceptive, illegal scheme that made consumers think that they were increasing drivers' pay when Amazon was actually diverting tips to reduce its own labor costs and increase profits," Racine said in a tweet. The total cost of the Amazon program, $5 for the first million thank yous, plus $20,000 for each of the 5 most thanked drivers, is $5.1 million. Amazon has an estimated 250,000 drivers, meaning that the $5 million averages out to just $20 per driver for a potential holiday bonus. Amazon's market, that's fucking insane. Amazon's market cap is nearly $1 trillion, making this initiative amount to a 0.010% of its net worth. Meanwhile, the company spent $4.3 billion working to bust Amazon's union campaign last year. While Amazon drivers make somewhere between $18 and $25 an hour, over 70% of UPS workers make $42 per hour, according to S&P Global, as Amazon dominates market share in e-commerce and deliveries. And again, UPS unionized. Teamsters. There's problems with that union, but you can see the difference there. Amazon has recently made investments to increase driver benefits and raised wages $1 per hour. But Amazon labor advocates say that the dollar isn't enough. I mean, it's literally half of what UPS, over 70% of UPS workers are making. These investments, nearly $1 billion over the next year, come at a time when Amazon might literally run out of people to work in its warehouses. While Amazon could be using this money to pay its workers without some customer aspect attached to it, as it refuses to abide by national labor laws, the initiative will hopefully bring some kindness into Amazon's driver days, which can be marred with hostility, as long as Amazon passes real tips on. So there's that. Looking into the grab bag to see what else we've got going on, if there's anything there. Have a couple of stories I see that I know I want to cover tomorrow because it's just going to open up too much of a conversation today. I guess a couple other things. So the most recent video that I had posted was one about Elon Musk getting torn to pieces in a Twitter space, after which they nuked the Twitter space feature. They completely removed it from the site. They were banning links to Mastodon. They were banning links to Facebook and Instagram. All this finally came to a head with Elon Musk posting a poll asking the site, "Hey, do you all hate me?" And the answer was yes. So crazy things happening at Twitter recently. And I thought coming off of that, there was a brief story here featured on the BBC. So there was a social media sociological study that found that Twitter's algorithm favors right-leaning politics. This is actually from last year. And sometime around this time, although I think it was in 2020, we did a story, early story on S4A, something to the effect of Facebook equals Fashbook question mark, and it was basically like the same kind of thing was found on Facebook, where Facebook, like the entire board of Facebook, was right-wing Republican activists, like explicitly political people, and that the entire site was biased towards the right. You know, the right wing is constantly screaming about the liberal media, which of course, you know, to them is just like everything left of Hitler, basically. And no, the exact opposite is true, and it's true of Twitter as well. So anyway, Twitter amplifies tweets from right-leaning political parties and news outlets more than from the left, its own research suggests. So, quick article, let's read. The social media giant said that it made the discovery while exploring how its algorithm recommends political content to users. But it admitted it didn't know why, saying that that was a more difficult question to answer. I mean, don't they know what the algorithm is? But anyway. Twitter has previously faced claims of anti-conservative bias on its platform. Twitter's study examined tweets from political parties and users sharing content from news outlets in 7 countries around the world: Canada, France, Germany, Japan, Spain, the UK, and the US. It analyzed millions of tweets sent between the 1st of April and the 15th of August 2020. Researchers then used the data to see which tweets were being amplified more on an algorithmically ordered feed compared with a reverse chronological feed, both of which users have an option of using. They found that mainstream parties and outlets on the political right enjoyed higher levels of algorithmic amplification compared with their counterparts on the left. Raman Chowdhury, director of Twitter's Meta, which stands for Machine Learning, Ethics, Transparency, and Accountability Team, said that the company's next step was to find out the reason behind the phenomenon. Quote, in 6 out of 7 countries, tweets posted by political right elected officials are algorithmically amplified more than the political left. Right-leaning news outlets see greater amplification compared to left-leaning news outlets. Establishing why these observed patterns occur is a significantly more difficult question to answer, and something Meta will examine if we feel like it. Researchers noted that the difference in amplification could be due to the differing strategies used by political parties to reach audiences on the platform. Time out, though. Unless they know what the Twitter algorithm is, how are they exploiting it? They also said that the findings didn't suggest that its algorithms pushed, quote, extreme ideologies more than mainstream political voices, another common concern expressed by Twitter's critics. Wait a minute, though. I mean, we're talking about what they're calling right-wing political parties. I mean, we can get into the study more for details, but I mean, a lot of, quote, mainstream right-wing parties have now adopted extreme ideologies. I mean, you can see that in the Republican Party clearly. So, anyway. This is not the first time that Twitter has highlighted apparent bias in its algorithm. In April, the platform revealed that it was conducting a study to determine whether its algorithms contributed to, quote, unintentional harms. In May, the company revealed that its automatic cropping of images had underlying issues that favored white individuals over black people and women over men. So, anyway, a little bit of Twitter odds and ends there, and I think we're going to call it there for the stories and stuff. There's more stuff for tomorrow, but let's finish out with the chat for the rest of our time together today. Scrolling back up to where we were in the chat. Kind of a curveball, but what do you think about the soapbox? I'm not sure what you mean about the soapbox. For feeding cats, you can't be trespassing on public property unless you have first broken the law. Trespassing on public property is a secondary offense. Welcome to the United States of terrorism. There That fancy feast could have fentanyl in it, and a whole squad could be killed just looking at it. Okay, so back on the soapbox thing, I like, oh, like Twitch and Twitter and online platforms are bigger soapboxes, but I notice public speaking is sometimes required in organizing. Well, yeah, if you're having a in-person gathering, yeah. I mean, soapboxing, it used to be literally in the old days of agitating, when people would maybe use like wheat pasted stickers. The IWW used to call those silent agitators. They would just like, put stickers up all over the place. Or, there would be pamphlets, but even pamphlets, took some work to produce. People would literally stand on a soapbox and just like gather a crowd and just, you know, agitate. Um, you need to speak to people, sometimes strangers. I've cold approached people on the street and knocked on doors. Are there any writings on the soapbox for communists? I would be interested in that. I don't know specifically about soapboxing. It's an interesting question. Let me see what there is on. I mean, you don't see a ton of soapboxing these days. Generally, people sort of preaching in public is. I mean, people are just afraid of each other in general in the U.S. now. Like, there's such a state of overall tension and paranoia that if you see somebody like talking in public, I mean, um, I think it people get scared of the implications almost. So I don't know. I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but I mean, especially just with the cops being the way that they are, the odds of the cops stepping in to break it up and then like shooting somebody in the head are like just so great. I think again, we live in fairly tense times. I'm sure there's there are settings where that would be possible, but a lot of settings also where it could escalate into something like dramatically awful. It's a slippery slope from feeding cats to all cats demanding lasagna. That's how we get Garfieldism. I didn't know the cops were going to arrest him. Yeah. That would be the mayor in that situation. The messed up thing is that police have a quota for tickets and arrests like they're working in a factory. Feels like the cops are just making shit up to fill their quota. Yeah, I don't know if they do that universally, but I've definitely seen places where there's like a quota. Like they have to hand out a certain amount of tickets. And yeah, the cops can get away with lying about cats chewing through steel because they know they'll never face perjury charges like an ordinary person immediately would for making such a ludicrous claim under oath. Agree. I mean, if it's happened, I would love to see it. The department needed money for donuts, so they went after some grandmas. I mean, possibly great grandmas. One was 85. All tips will be stolen by Amazon. Yeah, I mean, what kind of accountability is there on that? Oh, I said thank you into the thing. Oh, I'm sorry, Alexa didn't record it. Speaking of cops, I don't know. The whole thing of people using like Alexas, um, the thing is just listening to you 24/7. Cannot understand it. I cannot understand that. Oh, I have a smart house. Well, I don't know. I don't know. Your house might be smart. I'm not so sure about you. Not that our individual boycotts amount to much, and I don't judge people for using Amazon, but it's still frustrating. Yeah, for boycotts to work, they do have to be really well organized. That said, I really don't use Amazon. And you know what? You can live just fine without using Amazon. You really can. I think I've maybe used it once a year for the last few years. and like only for stuff I really could not get anywhere else. So yeah. Yeah, you don't have to use it. I mean, I live a kind of anti-commercial life. Like I do a lot of DIY stuff. Um, whether it's kind of like cooking for myself or, other things, like you can definitely learn to do more things for yourself. And there is the question of time and things like that. And, obviously when it gets down to like, shoe, like it's kind of hard to make shoes for yourself or stuff like that. I'm sure it's doable, but yeah, a lot of people just I kind of treat it like a game. Like I get creative with myself of like how few things can I end up buying but still get the thing that I need to do done. And it's kind of a fun challenge, but I mean, yeah, for boycotts to work, it's got to be much better organized than that. But yeah, absolutely, it can be done. People think that their lives would like end, and no, I think a lot of the noise in your life would end is what would end. Stepping back from a lot of this stuff. It's like we were talking about earlier. The sort of abandoned and natural spaces that are dramatically underused. Um, doesn't it come down to the Twitter algorithm favoring content that's controversial, which more often means right wing content? Well, according to Twitter, they don't know, so I don't know. Okay, they take it back. I agree. I shouldn't have said controversial. I meant that the algorithms are designed to drive engagement. So the more outrageous the tweet, the more people will click and share, both those that agree and those that criticize. Um, I mean, yeah, but we don't really know how that algorithm works. We just don't know. Yeah, the point still stands that seem to be intentionally boosting right wing voices. I mean, again, they're denying that they're doing it intentionally, but their system clearly is doing it. Yeah, traditional public forum is sidewalk, parks, government buildings for soapboxing. I mean, as far as the megaphone thing, Alex Jones used to do that. I think a lot of people just consider it obnoxious at this point. No, Caleb Maupin used to do it as well. Random question, but for anyone here not on mobile, do you use Linux rather than Windows and or Mac OS? I prefer not to be under Microsoft's or Apple's thumbs. Yeah, I would recommend that actually. Windows sucks. I mean, hey, we're gonna update your system now. Don't unplug your computer for 2 hours, like whatever. Yeah, Microsoft really act like they own your computer, and there are open source, completely free, and fully functional alternatives out there that give you much, much, much more control over your system. And you don't need to, know code. You don't need to be a programmer, anything like that. These are like out of the box solutions. Anybody looking to get into a free open source alternative to Windows on your system, look at Ubuntu. Ubuntu. It is probably the most user friendly version of Linux. You can install it on your system even alongside Windows and have like you can either boot into that or into Windows. You can run it off of a flash drive and try it out. I would recommend trying that. I first tried it years and years ago, going on like 20 years ago, and I was like, this is interesting. And yeah. In Chicago, the Black Lives Matter protests seem to have permanently undone the quotas for tickets. They still have enough red light and speed traps, also parking tickets, and traffic violations are still being given out, but they ended the quotas. As far as I know, they haven't been reinstituted. Well, that's good. Welcome, Swiss communist. In Greece, we did a great boycott of a food delivery platform to support workers, and it worked fine. It's already tomorrow here. Thanks, S4A. Bye, everyone. Okay. Well, that's cool. I would love to hear more about that boycott, actually. Um, Greek boycott, food delivery. Okay. Somebody else chiming in for Linux. There is a version of it called Manjaro, Manjaro, that is easy to use. The most user-friendly Linux is still not very user-friendly. I would strongly disagree with that. I mean, it works exactly like Windows. Where are you coming from in saying that? Also, good luck getting games to work on it. I don't know what kind of games, but yeah, I don't know. Learning about Linux OS stuff and generally how to be more private online. The only downside is most of the experts are huge libertarians. And again, I mean, you know, I'm libertarian in a sense. I believe in civil liberties, but I'm not a capitalist. Like, having civil liberties in capitalism, I mean, these are basically only civil liberties for people with money, because if you don't have economic rights, you don't really have any rights. The economic rights affect your right to survive. So, I think all things being equal, people, should have more freedom, not less. But that doesn't mean capitalism. Capitalism is freedom for capitalists and not for the overwhelming majority of the population. Um, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, all things being equal, uh, you know, people, of course, should be free to pursue the things that they'd like to do. I set up Ubuntu recently. They have this new weird snap system that everyone hates, about to switch to Mint or something similar. I have seen the snap system. I don't really understand it myself, but it does constantly um, give you like pop-ups, and yeah, I'm not really sure what that's about. Like, it's always trying to update things, but it gets weird. The overall system is fine to use, but I think that the last version of Ubuntu worked better in general. I think that it glitched less and it was just better. So maybe I'll straighten it out in the next version. But it still works fine. It's free, and Microsoft isn't constantly updating, like taking over your system to update it when you don't want. Okay, thank you. The Greek platform's name is eFood. I will check that out. All right, getting close to the end today. Gaming works pretty well on Linux using Lutris, Lutris, and ProtonDB. I recommend checking it out, comrades. Um, okay. I think we'll probably just about leave it there for today. We've been going for about 3 hours here, and we got to do this whole thing again tomorrow. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for showing up. We got 45 people in the chat as we're signing out for the day. Like I said, we'll be back with more stuff tomorrow. How to do anti-fascist research and actions. A couple things about Biden's recent same-sex marriage thing, as well as Texas's. Seems like they're trying to set up a database for trans people. Does not look good. And of course, more chatting and other stuff. So anyway, I appreciate the back and forth with everybody. A lot of people listen to these streams while they're at work and stuff like that. Fully support that. And thanks to everybody again showing up in the chat. You helped to make this what it is. And for the many, hundreds of people listening. And also thanks to the people on YouTube showing up after the fact, engaging, leaving comments, and anyway, just it's really nice to have seen this community grow. And we'll be back again tomorrow, Thursday, December 22nd, at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. is when we start, and we go for several hours. We'll see you then.